Welcome to the time frame bonus module. I'm pretty excited to be diving into this one, you guys. So this one, it can be complicated for some people, okay? Other people are going to pick up on it right away. If you've got a good eye for fractals, then you're pretty golden. If you kind of get cross-eyed looking at fractals, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time. But it doesn't mean that you can't see it. But when you do, and this is the best like correlation that I can kind of give, it's like when you master time frame fractals with Elliott wave and you kind of see the waves within the waves, it's like becoming Neo in Matrix and you are the one and you just see the charts and the market completely differently. It's almost like you're seeing through the time frames onto each fractal of Elliott wave. So it's really cool. And honestly, just being able to tell you guys this and show it to you and show you how to actually, practice the skill in order to develop it is giving you tenfold of an advantage when it comes to learning and mastering Elliott wave and trading in general. Like, this type of information just isn't flowing around out there. And it took me honestly probably about a year to really get this down. And it probably took probably once I actually realized what I was even doing and what it was and how to actually structure it and create a framework to teach others it. It probably was like a good 6 month process. So with that being said, it's giving you an upper advantage here. Now, what I want to talk about here with fractals is that Elliott wave in itself is a fractal, right? We go down, and on every single time frame, you're going to be able to see waves. But there's a correlation between time frames and your RSI and Elliott wave in order to help you differentiate which count and which time frame you're in. So remember, larger time frames take bigger precedence. They have bigger moves and so forth. So like on a daily, for example, let's just go out to a daily here. On a daily, we it takes a while for us to get overbought. And once we're overbought, we know that that's, the highest peak on that RSI is typically our third wave. Okay? So when we're looking at this run up right here, right? We don't really see a third wave in here yet, Maybe it's kind of starting right here. We're kind of topping out and this might be in. I'll talk about why. But really we're not up in that zone that, is screaming this is a third wave or a third wave. When we get to that zone, it's going to be like the daily is going to get like this. And we're going to get up closer to like 90. Look back here. These are your these are your third waves, okay? On like a daily standpoint. So this whole run up from back here, when we take a look and we know what this count is here now. So this count overextended third wave comes up there. So this was our third wave here. Okay. Expanded flat there, fifth wave up here. And you can see that slight divergence right between the third and the fifth. Okay. But on a daily standpoint, this is where the third wave finally really showed itself. Okay. And you can tell that we have one third wave in here. So honestly, on a weekly, is where this probably really topped out at if we look at the correlation to it. So here we go. Sure enough, weekly really topped out at the third. Okay, so and then the divergence wasn't really created until right here between these two peaks. So this was your third and your fifth. So I'm going to show you how you're going to be able to use this strategy where you're looking at your RSI to determine where your third waves are and then swapping in between your time frames in order to actually help you position where you're at and how far much longer you can go because the example I've got here is going to be just a textbook example. So let me go down to the daily here. And I want to give you just a textbook example of what I'm talking about with that example I just showed you. Okay. So if we're looking at this five wave structure here, okay, the third wave is always going to be the highest point on the RSI. But look at how many third waves we have within this run up here. We've got a third wave down here. We've got a third wave here. We've got a third wave here now. Okay. So this whole, a third wave within a third wave within a third wave, right? Each one of these is a different time frame where the RSI is going to be peaked the highest and give you uh, that RSI divergence between the third and the fifth. Okay. And so when you're on like a 15-minute time frame for this blue count is a 15-minute time frame. Okay. Your RSI is going to peaked out the top. You're going to see divergence between the third and the fifth. And it pulls back. It's about 1.5 to 3% on a 15-minute time frame is typical on Bitcoin. And so that pulls back. And then we get another move up. And when we switch from a 15-minute time frame to a 4-hour time frame, this point on the RSI all of a sudden shifts and becomes the highest. Okay. And that's showing you the third wave right here. And then the RSI pulls back, you make that move up. And now on the 4-hour, you've got divergence again. between the 4 hour. So on the third and the fifth wave. Okay. So now you get a bigger pullback. So each time frame has a different size of pullback that it's going to do for each one of the waves too. That's why I say smaller time frames are, smaller moves and larger time frames are bigger moves. But you can use the smaller time frames to pick your tops and bottoms of your top of your larger time frames here. So think about the 15-minute in the blue here. Okay. Well, in this fifth wave, you're going to have another 5 wave move. Okay. And on the 15-minute time frame, this third wave is going to be the highest point in this run up right here. And it's going to have divergence between the third and the fifth wave here as well. And so as long as you're moving in and out of your time frames, you know that you've set in one 15-minute divergence. So you've completed the third wave there. You're now looking for the 15-minute divergence here, but you're also zooming out to the 4 hour and noticing the divergence there so that you can literally pick the top of that matched up with confluence of other, tools that we've gone over, Fibonacci extensions, so forth, right? And so now we can catch that pullback coming back for the fourth here. And we know it's going to be bigger. On a 4 hour RSI divergence, we typically get anywhere between a 7 to a 12% pullback for this larger degree wave. These are correlations that I've gone back and personally back tested, and that you guys should do the same too so that you build that relationship with it. Go measure what the percent drop of every 4 hour RSI divergence is or gain, and build that relationship in between your time frames. Okay. So coming back to this now our 4 hour is showing divergence here, okay? But we've got the purple wave count, okay? The purple wave count shows that we have more room to go. So even though we have divergences on the smaller time frame and we're building up, we've still got another wave to go. And so now we zoom out to the daily chart, and the daily, this point right here on the daily, becomes the highest point on the RSI. And so now we know that we're dealing with a daily count, and that pullback, we're going to have a pullback here on the RSI, which is this fourth wave happening on the 4 hour time frame. But then we know that we're going to get divergence on the RSI here. And given what I showed you guys about being able to chart the RSI and everything too, we can pull extensions, trend lines, fibs, everything like that, and catch the 0.618 fib retracement from this high to this low. Plus, we know that this move comes up. We know to count the 5 wave structure in here, and we're looking on the smaller time frame for the divergence between the third and the fifth to pick the top of this fifth wave so that we can catch the bigger daily correction coming back down, which is going to be a 20 to 24% movement. Okay, so using the fractals of time, we can go in and out, we can pick our tops, and we can pick which movements we want. So we don't get stuck shorting the third wave here, expecting a big drop just because it's the very first divergence we see on a small time frame. But instead, we know to work our way up. Give an example of this, the relationship that I've built with it is that I know that when we're working off of a daily trend, okay, and I'm going to talk about those in just a second so that you can help with this. When we're working on a daily trend, I know that I need 3 15-minute RSI divergences to equal my 4 hour. I need 2 4 hour RSI divergences to get me to my daily. Okay. So what do I mean by that? It means that we've got the blue count here, gives me 15-minute divergence from here, another one here, and then one more right here. That's going to be 3 15-minute RSI divergences to pick my fifth wave top here. Okay. Now we've got the 4 hour, which is really just between here and here, which also means that we're going to have a slight one between here and the third wave here, which gives me my top one on the daily. Okay. So it's pretty cool, and I'm going to go through a live example of it over here too on how we can use it in order to kind of differentiate and help us also figure out where we're at in the count. Okay. So this is the power of time frames and fractals and correlation with Elliott wave. All right, so let's go over to the charts here and kind of pick a good example. So we kind of determined that nothing is really over aggressive on the daily here to show us that we're in a third wave. So what that's telling me is that any one of these structures here is probably not the top of a third wave yet on a daily standpoint, but probably just maybe a partial beginning wave of it. Okay. And so if we go down to a 4 hour, I want you to watch the RSI and how it shifts and it starts to give us tops. Okay. It starts to call out the third wave tops now. Okay. So here's our 4 hour. And what we can, highlight from this is we're highlighting all the very big tops on RSI here. And this is going to help us. It's not going to tell us, but it's going to help us tell us where our third waves are at in this 4-hour sequence. But we're going to need to drop down one more, and we're going to have to look at where the divergences are again to see where we're at in the larger count of it all. Okay. So, for example, here we've got this move coming up here. We've got this top here. Okay, so we're just going to circle these basically. And we've got one here and another one here. Okay, and we've got one more here. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to watch as we shift down. I'm going to go down to a 15-minute time frame. Why do I go through this sequence? You guys can choose whatever sequence you want, but I have built a relationship between a 4-hour and a 15. So you could do a 15, a 1 hour, and a 4 hour. My problem with that was that there wasn't a big enough differentiation between the 1 hour and the 15-minute and the 4 hour for me to really capitalize on, or at least I wasn't really good at seeing it, but there was a big enough difference between the 15-minute and the 4 hour that I could figure out where I was at a lot better. So teach their own, right? We're all going to see the market just slightly differently. The point is being able to, figure out what that is and then build a system around it. Okay. So check out a few different time frames, kind of go in and out of them and build that relationship over time by looking for this. Okay. Just knowing to look for this is powerful in itself. All right. We're going to go down to a 15-minute. All right, so we've got our circles here. They're much bigger now. Let it load up here. And notice that what I want us to notice here is where we're at in relation to that 4 hour. So notice that we've got more peaks in here on the 15-minute than we did on the 4 hour, right? And that's because it's counting our subwaves of this now, okay? So we know this is a peak on the 4 hour, but notice that our peak is right here on the 15-minute, telling me that this is a third wave of this count right here, okay? So this is a third wave leading into a third wave, okay? And then giving us divergence on that 4 hour. So same thing right here, right? So here on the 15-minute is our run up. Okay. And we had a 4 hour divergence right here, a little bit right here as well, or at least they were the peaks, right? And sometimes we're going to be dealing with the expanded flats. So you're going to have to figure out which one it is. And the biggest giveaway is that you're dealing with a 3 wave cycle, okay, for your expanded flats, instead of a 5th wave, which has 5 waves in it. So, but expanded flats, if they're in a 4th wave, are also going to show divergence too. So just FYI on that so that they don't kind of trick you or get you caught there. Okay. So let's take a look at this one right here when we were looking at the 4 hour. Okay. So this one here was the highest peak, and this one here was the highest peak. And overall, here's our divergence. Okay. So if we look at this high right here on the 15-minute, okay, that's our third wave of the 15-minute leading into the third wave of our 4 hour. This is the third wave of the 15-minute right here and here. That's our divergence right there, right here, okay, leading into the third wave of our 4 hour, okay? So what that's telling me is that we've got 2 divergences here, one on the 15, one on the 15, and then we've got this big one coming up right here, which is going to be on the 4 hour. But watch what happens on the 4 hour right here, okay? So we've got divergences. We're figured out our tops on the shorter time frame, okay? Now we move out to the 4 hour. I'm going to have to scroll back that direction here, so let it load for a sec. Beautiful. Okay, zooming down into here. All right, bringing the RSI back right there. So here's our peak right there. Okay, so that tells me that's the third wave. Notice how it shifted. We don't have that divergence right there anymore. The 15-minute had the divergence calling the third wave 4 hour for us. Okay, pull back. Then we get a wave 1, 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. Right here, notice that's our top on the 4 hour. Okay. So 4 hour right here does a double top. It's a weaker divergence on the double top, which tells me that maybe this is a daily trend that's happening right here that's coming to an end. Okay. But right here, that's not quite the top, right? We have this other move right here that we've got. Now, either this is an expanded flat or it's the fifth wave, which means that we do have our divergence right here, okay, which is right here on the RSI, okay, which means that this move back here, the divergence should actually be measured from here to here, which means that this point on the RSI is where the divergence should be measured and compared against this one, not this one. So if that makes sense, so one more time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This over here should be where the divergence is being compared to this one. If this is your third wave and this is your fifth wave up here, okay, of the larger degree, this is your wave one back here, okay, then that means this point right here should be compared to this one for the divergence, not this high here. Even though that's the high, that is only the high because it's the third wave of the fifth wave. Okay, so this point right here should be compared, and that's where you're going to see your strongest divergence at. So right there, candle close to candle close, like we talked about, and then from here to here, ignoring this pivot high right there. Okay, and now you can see that divergence again. So you're literally using the fractals and the time frames to see where your shorter pivots are going to pull back to. Okay, so we found our third wave. We're working our way up. We found our third wave again. So now we know we're in the third of the 4 hour time frame. So that pulls back, and now we've got our 4 hour divergence here. And if we move up to the daily, we can check to see if we're in a daily trend to seeing if that same RSI presents itself. So scrolling right back here, and I'm going to clear the screens here, and again, we're going to measure from here, candle close, to here, because that's our fifth wave high. Okay, this is the third wave of the fifth wave. Okay, and then we measure that same point here. So from here to right here, okay, tells me that we're not in a day that we are in a daily trend, like we're in a bigger trend because we don't have divergence on that RSI yet. Okay, so the daily, zooming out to the daily, it tells me that we're dealing with a bigger move, okay, which allows us to move up even higher than where we're at right now. Okay, so what that brings in here is that maybe if we look at where this peaked out at right here, boom, this high, and how we can apply that to real time analysis here is here's our high on the daily, and we do have a slight divergence here to this high here, okay, on RSI right there. Okay, so slight divergence is getting this first pullback. But if we're dealing with a bigger trend, like say a weekly trend, okay, or a 3 day trend, something bigger, then what that means is that this is really just the third wave potentially of a fifth wave, which we get the fifth up here. That is going to spike us right up a little bit higher here so that we get divergence right here and then divergence there, we get a bigger pullback there, and then we would be dealing with the weekly. And so this would shift to the highest point on a higher time frame, say like a 3 day, for example. Okay, and it would allow for a much bigger movement up. Okay, and then that pullback, then another divergence on say the daily or the weekly. So this is how a trend continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, is because it works off of the higher time frames in order to do so, creating those bigger waves. So this could also, depending on if we're in a pretty massive trend, which we've got a great uptrend for right now, if we're in a massive trend, then this could be the third and the fifth wave of the first leg of a bigger move. So in other words, this could be a slight divergence here, but that's only gearing up for a big move like that to where this gets really overbought. And then we kind of come back, do a divergence there, and we do a fifth wave like that. So pulling this back up, this here would create your divergence, which that becomes your third wave. Then we get a bigger pullback, right? This kind of does that again. And then we move up again. And now we create another divergence. And on the weekly, we create one divergence. So this move goes all the way back up for that fifth wave. And now we've got ourselves more like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 there. And we are killing off on that divergence there again, twice on the daily and then once on the weekly. Okay, so we're just building our way into it, and we're using the RSI and the divergences on each time frame to help us determine where we're at in the larger scheme of this entire trend. Okay, and it also helps us determine what trend we're on. So the fact that we were on a back here, we were on a 4 hour, but on the daily, we didn't really have a divergence yet on the daily between here and here, which tells me that this trend here was only a 4-hour trend and that we're just moving into a daily trend. Once this moves up, we'll know that we're on a daily or even a 3-day trend and then into a weekly trend from there. Okay. And we'll start to get bigger and bigger moves as the macro count unfolds and ravels out. So, in summary, it's a very powerful tool to be able to use time frames so that you don't get caught in thinking you're going to get a bigger pivot than what you actually are. And therefore, you know when to take profits. So on a 15-minute time frame, I know a divergence usually plays out to a 1.5 to 3% swing. So when I'm in like a wave, one, in the third wave of a wave one, it's going to have a smaller pullback. But when I've completed a wave three of a 4-hour time frame, it's going to have a bigger pullback. But I can use the smaller time frames like the 15-minute to pick my tops and see what the subwave counts are. When you can see the charts like this, you're literally looking through the candles, and each candle is unraveling a count for you to add to the next. Okay. So like I said, a little bit harder, but even just knowing this, you guys, is going to be such a big, powerful upper, edge for you guys in the market. Even the fact that you know what to look for and to pay attention to it and develop that relationship on your own is huge in itself. So take advantage of it. Even if it seems confusing now, just try applying it and looking for it in the markets, and you'll see just how powerful it really is. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. I'll see you for the next bonus video.